Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I have another guest, Shweta. She is a marketing analyst and she's going to talk about her journey and her career experience. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to her. Hi, Shweta.
Hi. So I'm Shweta. I'm a marketing manager at a large health insurance company, United Health Group. I'm really excited to be here talking about my journey with financial matters.
So, I guess we can go into the Q&A session. I have a couple of questions I wanted to ask you. So, starting with the first question, how did you choose your majors and how did it prepare you for your current role as a marketing analyst?
I guess my philosophy, like throughout most of college, when I was kind of getting into everything, was that I knew two things. I really liked healthcare and I really liked reading. And those two things kind of informed everything I did. So most of my activities were, if it's somehow health related and somehow gonna teach me something, I'm gonna do it. So I didn't really spend too much time on strategy outside of that. I know a lot of people probably watching this are pretty driven, have like a 500 step plan to try to achieve their goals, which is awesome. When I started out, I really didn't know what direction I wanted to go in. So I ended up just doing anything that fit those two criteria of like healthcare and working with interesting and engaging people. So I ended up majoring in public health, which, on a high level is pretty much trying to educate people about how to better deal with the healthcare system and trying to have the healthcare system better reach people. And a lot of those skills that you have to do either one of those is pretty much what marketing is made up of, right? It's about communication, it's about education, it's about trying to inform people and trying to really improve people's lives through that information. So that was sort of the basis of why I became interested in marketing. In my career to get to marketing analyst, there was a lot of kind of twists and turns there, doing a lot with startups and just emerging technology companies. Usually I didn't get paid at all, maybe a little bit of equity here and there. But that's really what started my career as a marketing analyst. Eventually, I ended up getting a paid role where I could do this for money, and that was at WebMD.
It sounds like you are really following what you love to do and your like interests. There are times where people might go to college and just choose a path where it is so structured or they may not even be interested in it, but they know that they'll have a job. But for you, it was kind of like even if you started off not getting paid for the first few positions, eventually even though you were following what you wanted to do, you finally were able to find something that was a paying job.
Yeah, that's a really really important thing to note is like, it's going to be pretty hard if you want to continue to do something you're interested in, because sometimes the market doesn't exactly care
Right.
about what you love to do. It's just really more what fills their needs.
What was your experience like as an analyst, and how did you know you wanted to go into this field?
What I realized, my first role was again doing all of these like market valuations for new products that WebMD was trying to bring on. And I got to see a lot of different types of healthcare tech. There was like health
Right.
education, there was diagnostics, there was some biotech. This is healthcare, right? Everybody, put really pessimistically, everybody has a body. And so everybody needs healthcare. And so when you're trying to do a market sizing or valuation of a product, you're like, this could reach everybody in the world. But what really differentiates a healthcare product then is how well it's marketed to people, how well
Mhm.
people see it as part of their lives, how much you actually can educate people about the product and what it does. That position, over and over again, I saw that the big differentiator for a lot of these smaller products, a lot of these smaller companies, was how well they reached their target audience.
What are some of the skills that someone may need to become an analyst?
Yeah, that's a good one. When I'm reviewing resumes for like interns or analysts to come on our team, the stuff that I look for is usually like a little bit more generalize. So one of the things is you have to have a bit of a talent for observing behavior on a large scale. And I think it's interesting because I think everybody in this day and age does that. You can kind of look online at any hashtag and observe behavior that way and say, the people who use this hashtag are more likely to be angry, or the people who use this hashtag are more likely to be happy, and you can make kind of generalizations that way. So to some extent, current social media environment has trained all of us to observe behavior in this way, and it's kind of a fun thing to do. But I think doing it in a formalized way and showing a consistent love of kind of looking at why people do things, how people are using a particular product, where the gaps are in that product, a thing that really comes with practice. And people who generally do that will have some sort of background in analyzing more qualitative data. And that is really, really helpful from a marketing analyst perspective. So that's one thing. We also look for more quantitative skills. So if you have any talent with statistics, that's really, really useful, because a lot of times when you're reporting back, you will need to, forecast. You'll need to tell people how much we are currently spending to get a new customer, how much that customer is worth to us in the long run. Those are the sort of questions we'll have to answer. So in order to kind of quantify some of that, you will have to have a little bit of talent with numbers. And I think the secret sauce, the one that often gets ignored, is this love of building and leveraging community. So I think this is one that's going to become more important, not only for marketing analysts, but for almost every profession in the future. Is like one of those things where they tell you coding is a really important skill. I think community building is like the next important skill. They want to kind of join a movement around it. That's a skill that's super hard to have, and it's super hard to kind of see what you need to do consistently to create that skill. And to be frank, I'm like barely any good at it, but I really want to get better at it. So yeah, that's another thing that has proven to be like over and over again, the best people on our team have usually, started a club or a movement or a community. They've built and maintained a community, and that's really important if you want to have a forum where you can communicate important ideas.
I'm glad to hear that not everything that you mentioned was related to the technical skills in terms of like you need to be good at Excel or data gathering.
Totally. Yeah. And I think my first boss was like an English major, I think, when he was in college, and kind of discovered that he loved to analyze behavior.
What made you want to transition roles to a marketing analyst? Because I know before you weren't doing that.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think the biggest thing that kind of pushed me towards it is when I kept seeing products, which were two different products that I distinctly remember, that were the technology that they were pitching was a whiteboard that would write your thoughts on it as you were talking. They were almost the exact same technology. In 5 months, the one with better marketing, the one that actually sent reps to different companies, to different academic institutions to say like, hey, you could use this and then kind of develop your technology. The one that kind of focused on building their community around them, I think their usership increased by like 3 or 4 fold, like 300, 400%, which was amazing. We didn't think they could do that. The other one focused most of their time and their money on improving their technology so that the notes that were taken were a little bit more accurate. And the second one did not grow quite as much, maybe 20%. And so if you're looking at the difference between the two, you have a lot more recurring revenue coming from one, and you have just a better technology on the second. So we went with the one that already had some recurring revenue on it. And so I think that's where I was like, well, if marketing can do that, I want to learn how to do that.
You mentioned the topic of technology. And so how does it come into play when making the role easier as an analyst?
Yeah, great question. So we use a lot of different ways to track people's behavior. That's what we use technology for in my role is how are people interacting with the world around them is one bigger question. And then the other question, which is a little bit closer to my role, is how are people interacting with our products in particular? So the way that that kind of bears out is, especially if we're looking at online marketing, at digital marketing, we're looking at how many people clicked a post. We're looking at how many people came back to the post. We're seeing, okay, if somebody saw one of our ads online and then they went to a couple other sites, did they come back? And did they end up getting our product after they came back? So those sorts of questions are best answered by technology. A couple of the ones that we use is like tracking softwares that we use. So Google Analytics is a big one. We also use Adobe Analytics. Another one, I think that's Facebook Analytics, Facebook Ads Manager, Google Ads, Bing Ads. Man, the list goes on. Any social media you can think of has some sort of ad tracking product attached to it. That very much helps because otherwise we're sort of guessing. We're saying, all right, well, we're going to spend this much money on ads, and this is what we're maybe expecting based on what the company tells us. So being able to track it yourself absolutely helps. Data cleaning, data validating sort of software. Excel is a big one, obviously. But more close to that is maybe like Tableau. We use a lot of like, in order to do some like prediction and forecasting, we'll like use R and Python to try to, build models. That's a little bit more on the technical side if we're looking at the whole all-encompassing marketing analytics perspective. So
what do you do on a day-to-day basis as an analyst?
Yeah. So I have a couple different duties, right? In the grand scheme of things, my whole job is to understand and report out how well we're reaching our consumers. So almost everybody in the United States. And so it's a huge swath of people to try to understand. And the best way we can do that is by cleaning, understanding, validating data that they give us. A lot of times this comes from our ad products. So I usually will spend like 3 to 5 hours a day doing a little bit of data analysis. And then I like to have my afternoons as kind of communication times.
And another question is, what do you enjoy most about your role?
So my favorite part, and this doesn't come often because, anything good you have to work for, is when I've finished an analysis. I might come up with like one nugget of information. So one that I came up with a couple of weeks ago was we found that a lot of our users of one of our new versions of our product were female, but a lot of times the person that they used the product on was below 18. And that's something that we had not noticed before because we'd never really targeted females as such, right? That age group as such. And so what's happening there is like, if you roll it back a little bit, it's a mom buying stuff for their kid. That was something that I was like, oh man, like nobody would have been able to see that. You could probably guess it, but this is a case where this like large swath of people is telling us something, a behavior that they know about themselves. And what came out of that was, now we're targeting moms to say, hey, if your kid gets sick, this is something that you can use. You can save exactly $32 on this medication. And think of that, like if you're a mom without a job, a $32 savings is awesome. So that's the best part of my job, is being able to deliver a very concrete result to like someone who might need it.
What's the most important thing you learned from your career?
I want to reiterate my philosophy from when I was in college, which is, if you know you like something, lean into that, because that's pretty much what I've done since, and it's worked out okay for me. It relates to, I think, advice that generally people give out, which has been time tested. If you like something, if you're good at it, especially lean into those talents, because that's what ends up making you unique, and that's what you're going to end up doing really, really well.
That's great advice. The next question is, along with your full-time job, I know you also help teach a course on entrepreneurship. So what inspired you to do that?
Yeah. So I mentioned a lot of different technologies that we use as marketing analysts.
Right.
And I think one thing that people don't realize is, first, the amount of data that gets collected on you and the amount of data people like me analyze. Like every time you sign up for a new social media site, every time you interact on social media, you're giving like people like me like more of a role, more of a job. So thank you. But I realized, when I was going through this, that a lot of people, especially ones who are starting out their business, might not know the richness of data that you could really get from anybody who interacts with any sort of digital product. Part of what inspired me to kind of take this role as a teacher was, there's so many different technologies. There's so much data locked in those technologies. I want to help people to unlock that data. I want to help people to kind of build that community.
I love how you're doing something different, and what we were talking about earlier, how you're like driven by your interests and your passions. What was the biggest thing that you gained from teaching this course?
You have to be completely 100% knowledgeable on all of the products you're teaching. And I mentioned there's like, Google Analytics, Facebook, Instagram. You need to know a little bit about Apple ads. These companies are constantly changing what they do, what data they collect. They're constantly fighting amongst each other to see who can collect more or less data, depending on whether they want to increase their users' privacy. And so one thing that I kept noticing was, I have to know this stuff because I'm teaching it. So it kind of forced me to be right in the middle of that, to not only understand what was going on, which is sometimes a little bit complicated. That's something that I really gained, is like the ability to kind of look at what's going on with a lot of these tech companies and understand it and have an opinion on it from a marketer and consumer perspective.
You almost have to know the products very well, using it yourself, which I think is really great.
Exactly.
The next question is, do you have any advice for those who are looking to become an entrepreneur?
It is important to surround yourself with people who maybe don't know as much as you about your particular narrow field, but maybe they do know about other things you don't know about. So surround yourself with people who have vastly different but helpful knowledge sets, because the people from my class who end up, doing well and really taking a lot out of the class are the ones that kind of actively pursue people.
And then I have a question here. This question's from Anna. She asks, many folks do their searches on browsers incognito. I'm curious to know if you have any ideas how one could track their favorite brands of healthcare and beauty products.
So if you do incognito searches, it just means that Google isn't tracking your activity. It doesn't mean that your activity isn't tracked completely. So like somebody like me could still see what you're clicking on and why you're clicking on it. So yeah, the rules still apply. The same technology works on those sites. So.
Right. So incognito does not mean incognito. It just
incognito
means
exactly. Yeah. Dirty truth.
Well, how do you maintain a good work-life balance?
I'm definitely still working on that one. Really like scheduling calls, scheduling things that with a community that doesn't have anything to do with your work. You don't get paid for and don't have any possibility of getting paid for are very, very, very rewarding. Just making time for that, like a couple hours a day, helps immensely with just mental clarity.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that you are working towards a good work-life balance. It's like a learning process, I feel like, for most professionals. The next question is, what are some of your passions outside of your work?
Ooh, great question. I love to travel. I love traveling. I love planning trips. Really find a lot of rewarding experiences when I travel. It forces you to look at the world in a new way. It forces you to appreciate your surroundings. And, you could definitely do the same thing just in your own home. It's more of a mindset shift. It's an exercise in gratitude. So that's why I'm really passionate about travel.
So this is a very last question. Could you give any last advice to those who want to start their career as an analyst or marketing analyst?
Yeah, I think practically speaking, a great thing to do is to take a Google Analytics certification course. It might seem a little bit technical and maybe you've never even dealt with Google Analytics, you have no reason to deal with Google Analytics, but if you're at all thinking about a career in marketing analytics, this is a great place to start because Google, as being the czar of online ads, has an interest in keeping people interested in their own data, and so they spend a lot of time and resources creating this educational content. And I got to say, they do a really great job. They have great documentation. I mean, yeah, I've been doing this for a couple of years, but it takes me, usually I refresh my certification every year, and it usually takes me like maybe a day, take a Saturday, grab a cup of coffee, and run through the Google Analytics course.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and your journey as a marketing analyst. I'm so glad that I was able to hear it. Thank you for spending the time to talk to us about it.
Of course, it was my pleasure. Definitely reach out to me if you've got questions. I'm always willing to help a potential marketing analyst.
I'll definitely put your contact information in the description box. So if you guys have any questions, you can ask Shweta there. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and we'll be back for more episodes in the future. Bye.
Bye.